What do we have here, y'all? What do we owe? That's Nolan right there, y'all. That's Nolan right there. I'm trying to do it slow for y'all. This one of them breeze by. You know how they do the little boomerang thing on Instagram and all. It's one of those.
Yes, sister, friend. I will share a longer version. I'm going to add it to this one. But the purpose of this video, I couldn't even sleep last night because I was trying to put A, B, C together. So this picture, the video, excuse me, on June the 23rd helps in a lot of ways because Warren stated in all of the videos in his interviews that they were a tight-knit group of people. And he also said that there were around 20 to 30 people scattered in those 3 or 4 different boats that they had taken, correct? Okay, so
we saying this one?
The trip on June the 23rd, per Warren, are a tight-knit group of people, would be the same people that we saw inside this picture.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh. What do we have here, y'all? What do we owe? That's Nolan right there, y'all. That's Nolan right there. I'm trying to do it slow for y'all. This one of them breeze by. You know how they do the little boomerang thing on Instagram and all. It's one of those. Y'all see that? So I want y'all to pay attention to see everybody. I'm gonna see who that is in the front. Y'all see this? That's Nolan. That is Nolan. I'm trying to see who it. So you got all these damn people ain't saying nothing. This is wild. 1, 2, 3. There's somebody right here in the cut. There's somebody right here. Somebody right here. 1, 2, 3, 4. And there's somebody at the front of a driver. 5, 6, 7. Justice for Nolan, man. Let's get it, y'all. Look, 2 right there. Hold on.
So
2
that
up
is
there.
where I'm.
2 up there.
So that is.
Look, 2 up there. Just enjoying the breeze and shit. That's sad, man. Sad, man.
So that is where I'm going with the video because Warren, again, said that they were a tight-knit group of friends. Like, there's no outsiders in their circle. And so the same people that are on that video on June the 23rd are the same people that are in that still image on Horns Island, allegedly Horns Island, that we see here.
If 3 black people took a white man on a boat expedition and didn't return with him, the president would be making a speech right now. There is a double standard of justice and coverage. But here's why Kevin discusses in a great post about the national news's silence on Nolan Wells. If you Google Nolan Wells New York Times, there is no article. Nolan Wells MSNBC, nope, they haven't written one. Try CNN, all that they have is a TikTok-style video, no written article. And the Washington Post finally has an article only after his body was found. Here's why Kevin references a study that found while black people make up roughly 35% of missing persons cases in the FBI database at the time of the study, they received only 7 to 11% of media coverage. This is why local news outlets like the Mississippi Free Press that's been reporting on this are so important, and why it's so dangerous that news has been consolidating into these big billionaire-owned corporations, forcing lots of local outlets recently to keep shutting down. You can find the GoFundMe of Nolan's family at the Schmink and My Schmile. And one of the most important things is that families will tell you what they need. Sometimes that's privacy, spreading the word, financial support. We don't want to assume, we want to let them tell us how to help. His mother's request a couple days ago was if you have any pictures or videos that were taken on the northwest tip of Horn Island on July 4th, to reach out to her. This is her Threads account, and you can provide evidence to help their investigation.
This is why we must be our own news. We cannot look for these people to save us, y'all. We cannot look to these people to push out our message and try to get justice for us. They are all connected, y'all.
How does young men who we don't really have any evidence that committed a crime, how do they get painted as criminals? How do they get painted as being responsible for the death of a person that was considered their friend?
By putting you on the case. For real, that's like someone accused of SA and then turning him Republican. It's pretty much an admission of guilt. For real, why are you even on the case? You're not a cop anymore, Anthony Anderson, who would never be in Blackish. You asked, how do they get painted as criminals? How do you paint them innocent? All you are doing is defending those kids. You're interviewing them. You're pretty much their spokesperson. And just like with Sonia Massey, George Floyd, and everyone else, you're lying about this case. You said those kids took polygraph tests. Now, you were checked and proven wrong by Nancy Grace, but here's her interviewing the kid's lawyer.
Have your clients taken polygraphs?
Nancy, my clients have not taken a polygraph test.
Now, this guy here is a boy's lawyer. His name is Tyler Cox. Of course, it's Tyler Cox. Now, what does this lawyer want you to see? Advertisement for his business, Call Cox, and a bottle. The only two things he's advertising, his business and another business. Now, if you zoom in, you'll clearly see it's a bottle of Verdict bourbon. And he's been doing interviews all over, and he always has that bottle of bourbon behind him. Now, here's Brandon Tatum's podcast. What do you see? I see Verdict bourbon, right? Verdict bourbon is owned by Brandon Tatum. What a coincidence! So you don't think it's a conflict of interest for someone to market your product, who is also the lawyer of the white boys that you are protecting and painting innocent? Now, I'm positive Brandon Tatum's gonna have a weak-ass excuse. Yeah, when I met him, I gave him a bottle because Verdict, he's a lawyer, Verdict, you know. But if the lawyer had any brains at all, he would see how this would look. By the way, you're defending those kids, Brandon. I wouldn't be surprised if they were drinking Verdict bourbon on the boat. Please threaten to sue me again, Brandon. Let's take this shit to discovery.
Allow me to drop a thought. Black parents must come to realize that they may be part of the problem when their kids lose sight of their own cultural heritage and race. Some black parents love the idea of their black kid being the only black kid in a white group.
Right now, the official autopsy is locked, sealed, going to a grand jury. The state is not talking, but somebody's phone was on that island and it captured something, and now it's circulating on TikTok. Think about that for a second. The people who are supposed to be investigating this case have not even looked at Nolan's cell phone yet. Not formally, not as of this week, but strangers on the internet are piecing together footage frame by frame. Let's get into it. We have two autopsies. One says undetermined, foul play not ruled out. One is completely sealed. And the only people who will see that second autopsy before the rest of us are grand jurors. Once the investigation is complete, the case materials, including the autopsy report, will be presented to a grand jury, which will decide whether what happened to Wells involved a crime. So the question we are sitting with today is not the one most people are asking. Everyone is asking, did something happen to Nolan? That is not the question. The question is this: why does the physical evidence found on his body not match the explanation that was handed to his family? And that is where this TikTok footage comes in. Because here is the thing about a case where the official story has gaps. People fill those gaps. Sometimes with misinformation. Sometimes with something that actually matters. And right now, Crump's team is doing something that tells you they believe the footage is significant. A newly completed independent analytical review of photographs, videos, GPS coordinates, and witness accounts concludes that the available evidence still leaves a material gap in the timeline between Wells's last independently corroborated sighting and the reported departure of the boat that transported him to the island. A material gap. That is the language of a legal document. That is not a theory. That is a finding. And that 22-page analytical review, the report stresses that it reaches no conclusion about criminal or civil responsibility, and instead identifies evidence investigators may still need to resolve unanswered questions. So even Crump's own team, on paper formally, is not saying they know what happened. They are saying there are still questions that have not been answered. And that gap, that material gap, that is exactly where this new TikTok footage lives. Notice this. Ben Crump's team right now is working with forensic audio specialists. They are reviewing the emergency call made by one of Nolan's friends on July 4th. The call to the towing company. The one where someone reported the boat was sinking. Forensic audio specialists are reviewing the complete sea tow emergency call from July 4th, while ocean engineering experts are examining how Wells's body ultimately came to be recovered near the northwestern tip of Horn Island. And Crump himself said this: "We want to know how is that possible with the oceanic tides. You've got low tides and high tides, so it's not adding up. Let me slow that down for you. Nolan's body was found in the same general area where he was last seen, and the family's team is bringing in oceanic engineering experts to figure out whether that is even physically consistent with a drowning scenario." Think about what that means. If the currents and the tides say that a body in the water should have moved, and the body did not move, what does that tell you? That is not speculation. That is a scientific question, and right now, experts are trying to answer it. But before we go deeper, let's go back to what was found on Nolan's body, because there is a detail in this autopsy that the news cycle has not sat with long enough. The independent autopsy also found red discoloration on the back of his head. Red discoloration on the back of the head. The family's attorney was direct about this. They don't know what caused it. They don't know if it contributed to his death. But here is what we do know. The pathologist saw it. He documented it. And his overall conclusion was still, foul play cannot be ruled out. Now here is where it gets complicated. The report appeared to have gaps because of what Crump said were missing body parts and incomplete procedures. Missing body parts. The doctor who performed the independent autopsy in Washington, D.C., is working to obtain Wells's throat for examination. It was not present at the time of the second autopsy. His throat was not present at the time of the independent autopsy. Now, I want to be careful here. There can be legitimate explanations for why tissue is removed during an initial examination. That happens in forensic pathology. But when a family has already hired a second pathologist to look for signs of what might have happened, and a significant piece of anatomy is not available for that examination, the family's legal team notices. Whether a jury sees it the same way remains to be seen, but the family's team noticed, and they are formally seeking that tissue now. This is the point in this case where we have to separate the questions. Whether Nolan Wells drowned, that is one question. Whether the investigation into how he died has been handled with the rigor this case demands, that is a completely different question. And right now, only one of those has even partially been answered. Let's talk about what happened when the community tried to get answers on their own, because this is where it gets dark in a different way. 3 people have been charged with threatening a judge, a witness, and local officials connected to the investigation into the death of Nolan Xavier Wells. 3 people. None of the 3 appear to know Wells, his family, or the boating group, or be part of the investigation. This is what happens when a family is left in silence and the public perceives that silence as complicity. People take it into their own hands. And now there is something else on the table: a phone. More than a month after Nolan Wells' death, investigators still have not looked into the teen's cell phone, which his family has reportedly not yet turned over to police. Think about what that means. It has been over a month. The state autopsy is done. The grand jury is next. And investigators have still not examined the cell phone of the person who died. Wells' parents have hired civil rights attorney Ben Crump to do a review of the investigation, and they want there to be a joint investigation of the phone involving the state, the FBI, and their independent experts. They are not withholding the phone to hide something. They are withholding the phone because they do not trust a one-sided examination. The cell phone could hold critical information about where Wells was before he died, what kind of messages he was sending, and whether any content was deleted. And here is the detail that Nolan's mother has shared publicly. Wells's mother said that her son's friends had custody of the phone and that she was able to get it the night she reported him missing. She said in interviews that there was no Snapchat history for the day, which she found suspicious. No Snapchat history for the day. Now, Snapchat has a feature where messages disappear automatically. That is built into the app. That is not automatically suspicious. But when a mother picks up her missing son's phone and the day he disappeared leaves no digital trail, she notices. And so did Crump's team. The team is also continuing talks with the district attorney's office about conducting a joint inspection of phones related to the case. Not just Nolan's phone. Phones. Plural. Attorney Eric Hertz said he believes the FBI would also be present for that inspection. The FBI. At a joint phone inspection. In a case where the official position, as of weeks ago, was that there was no evidence of foul play, that tells you something about how seriously the family's legal team is pushing this. And now, on top of everything, TikTok. People on social media have been surfacing footage from that day. New clips, new angles, things the family says they have not seen before, and Crump's team is reviewing them, because in a case where the official investigation has left a documented, formal material gap, sometimes the evidence that matters most is already out there, already on someone's camera roll, already uploaded, already being watched by millions of people while investigators catch up. Now here is the question we are going to spend the rest of this video with. If the TikTok footage is significant, if it fills any part of that material gap, what does it change? And if it does not, if it turns out to be noise, what does it tell us about the information void this family has been left in? Because here is what we know right now. Attorney Eric Hertz told NPR he believes the case could go before a grand jury in just under 30 days. 30 days. Which means the window for new evidence to matter is closing. The grand jury will not be investigating. The grand jury will be evaluating what investigators already have. And if the TikTok footage has not been formally submitted, if the phone inspection has not happened, if the throat tissue has not been examined, what exactly is the grand jury going to see? That is not a rhetorical question. That is the actual legal problem sitting in the middle of this case right now. Notice this. Several of Wells's friends have retained high-profile lawyers in case of wrongful death suits and to potentially file defamation suits. The friends have lawyers for defamation suits. That means they are already preparing for the possibility that what gets said about them in the next phase of this could be legally actionable. People do not hire high-profile attorneys for defamation unless they are anticipating that something significant is about to be said. What are they anticipating? We do not know. The lawyers have not said. But it is a detail worth sitting with as we go deeper into the evidence that the TikTok footage may or may not support. And that is exactly where we are going next. Because the footage itself, what people are actually saying they saw, is not just viral content. It is potentially the most important piece of unexamined evidence in this entire case. And the question is, does it fill the gap? Or does it just make it bigger? The independent autopsy was performed by forensic pathologist Dr. Robert Mitchell. Board certified, experienced, not a commentator, a pathologist. And when Dr. Mitchell sat down to examine Nolan Wells, he found something. Reading from the report prepared by forensic pathologist Dr. Robert Mitchell, Crump said the report showed no evidence of fractures or bruising, but also did not rule out the possibility of foul play. No fractures, no visible bruising. And still, foul play not ruled out. Think about what that means for a second. Because in a drowning case, a straightforward accidental drowning, the findings are consistent. Water in the lungs, signs of hypoxia, a conclusion. Here the pathologist looked at this body, and what he had in front of him was not enough to reach a conclusion. And there is a reason for that. Crump said the body wasn't in a state that would allow a complete forensic review of the remains. The body was in the water for 2 days, 2 full days, before it was recovered. And that matters enormously from a forensic standpoint. Because 2 days in the Gulf of Mexico in July does things to a body that cannot be undone. Tissue degrades. Evidence of injury can become indistinguishable from evidence of decomposition. The window for certainty closes fast, which is exactly why the missing tissue matters so much. The independent autopsy also found red discoloration on the back of his head. But the report appeared to have gaps because of what Crump said were missing body parts and incomplete procedures. Red discoloration, back of the head, and a throat that was not present for the second examination. Now, forensic pathologists who reviewed this case publicly for CNN made an important point here, and this is something we need to sit with. It is not unusual for a secondary or independent examiner to not have access to the findings of the primary examination and investigation because of laws limiting what can be released publicly. So that is the fair counterpoint. The absence of tissue at a second autopsy is not automatically nefarious. Tissue is sometimes retained. Protocol varies by jurisdiction. A defense attorney in a future civil or criminal proceeding will absolutely raise that. But here is the separate question. If the state's autopsy, the one we cannot see, examined that throat tissue and found something or found nothing, the family will not know what was found until a grand jury does first. That is the structural problem. The family's pathologist is working with incomplete information. The family's legal team is working with incomplete information, and the only body empowered to see the complete picture is a grand jury whose proceedings are sealed. Grand juries listen to evidence presented by prosecutors to decide whether anyone should be indicted on criminal charges and potentially go to trial. Their proceedings are not open to the public, and jurors are prohibited from talking about grand jury proceedings. So the family is on the outside, the public is on the outside, and Crump's team, as independent as they are, is working from partial information. That is not a conspiracy. That is the American legal system doing exactly what it was designed to do. But when a black family in Mississippi is waiting to find out whether anyone will be held accountable for their son's death, the system's design and the system's effect are two different things. And that brings us to the pattern. Because notice this case did not happen in a vacuum. The case has garnered national attention, with people questioning the investigation and whether Wells's race was related to his disappearance. And when people raise race in Mississippi, they are not being inflammatory, they are being geographic. Mississippi is the state where Emmett Till was murdered in 1955, where the killers were acquitted by an all-white jury in 67 minutes. Where those same killers later confessed to the crime in a magazine interview knowing they could never be tried again. That is the context. That is the soil this case is growing in. And the people paying closest attention to this case understand that history without needing it explained. One of Wells's friends said Wells stayed on the island to talk to a girl, but others have cast doubt on that notion. That is the official account that started circulating early. He stayed behind, by choice, to talk to a girl. And the family heard that, and they rejected it. Not out of grief, not out of emotion, out of knowledge of who their son was. His parents said he was a strong swimmer, an athlete, a college football player, someone who would not just stay on a federal island with no way home. And now there is a subpoena. The Sun-Herald reported that subpoenas have been issued for several social media companies, such as Facebook and TikTok. Subpoenas to Facebook and to TikTok, which means the footage circulating on social media, the footage we are talking about in the title of this video, is no longer just viral content. It is now legally compelled evidence. Subpoenas have been issued for several social media companies such as Facebook and TikTok. Friends, family members, and local officials have also been told not to delete any records because litigation is reasonably anticipated. Do not delete any records. Litigation is reasonably anticipated. That is preservation language. That is what lawyers send when they believe something is coming, something civil, something criminal, or both. And it goes to everyone connected to this case, friends, family members, local officials. Think about the mechanics of that for a second. If you are a local official, elected or appointed, and you have received a preservation letter telling you not to delete records, what kind of records are they asking you to keep? Communications, texts, emails, documents. That is not a fishing expedition. That is a legal team that believes there is something in those records worth preserving. Now let's talk about what the family actually wants, because this is the part of this case that gets lost in the noise. The public is angry. Social media is making threats. Celebrities are posting, activists are marching, and in the middle of all of it, there are two parents, Christine Wells Wansley and Elmore Wansley, who stood at the Knock National Convention in front of a packed room and said something very simple. There's so many people out in the public asking all of these questions, but the only question that we have is what happened to our son. That is it. That is the whole thing. One question. Not revenge, not a predetermined verdict, not a political statement. What happened to our son? And their attorney, Ben Crump, was equally precise about what the process should look like. This is only another part of the puzzle, and even though it tells us significant information, we still have more questions than we have answers at this time, Crump said of the independent autopsy results. That is a measured statement from a man who does not typically give measured statements. Even Crump is saying, we do not have the full picture yet. This autopsy is a piece, not a conclusion. And then he made a formal request that tells you exactly how seriously the family is taking the grand jury process. Crump added that Dr. Mitchell should be included when a Mississippi grand jury hears the results of the death investigation. He wants the independent pathologist in the room when the grand jury hears the evidence. That has not been agreed to yet. That is a request, not a guarantee. But it tells you that the family is not content to have the state's version of the autopsy be the only forensic voice the grand jury hears. Now let's be precise about where this case legally stands right now. The state autopsy, complete, sealed, headed to a grand jury. The independent autopsy, undetermined. Foul play, not ruled out. Throat tissue still being sought for additional examination. The state's official position, as of the last public statement from law enforcement, accidental drowning is suspected. No evidence of foul play. The family's position, that explanation does not fit the person they knew or the physical evidence found on his body. The grand jury, not yet convened for this case. No public timeline confirmed. But attorney Eric Hertz told NPR he believed it could happen in under 30 days from his statement, which means we are in that window now. Once the Jackson County Sheriff's Department investigation into Wells's death is complete, the Jackson County DA's office said it will present the case to a grand jury. The DA's office said convening a grand jury does not mean there is any criminality and is standard procedure for most unnatural or suspicious deaths in the county. Standard procedure. That is what the DA's office is calling this. And the DA herself has been consistent about that framing. Every death in the county, except those of natural causes and non-criminal car wrecks, is presented to your grand jury, McElrath said. Many people don't know that we have handled death investigations in this manner my entire career. So on paper, Nolan Wells is not being treated differently. His case is following standard protocol. But the family's legal team has formally documented a material gap in the evidence. The independent pathologist formally documented that foul play cannot be ruled out, and the phone that could answer the most basic questions about what Nolan's final hours looked like has not yet been examined by any official investigative body. Despite the unanswered questions, Mississippi law enforcement have not released the official autopsy or toxicology reports. Jackson County District Attorney Angel Myers McElrath announced that those records will remain sealed until a grand jury can review them. With an independent autopsy unable to determine how he died, a newly announced grand jury review, and the district attorney's office defending their decision to keep details of the case out of public view while the investigation remains active, the family of Wells is not quieting in their demand for answers. They are not quieting. And the community around them, the people who gathered by the hundreds for a funeral service while his parents stood at a podium and talked about a boy who would have turned 19 the following month, they are not quieting either. The NOC National Board of Directors adopted a resolution calling on local, state, and federal authorities, including the United States Department of Justice, to complete an in-depth and openly transparent review of how Nolan came to be left on the island and of all activities in the hours before his body was found. The Department of Justice. That is federal pressure, on top of a state grand jury, on top of an independent investigation, on top of subpoenas to social media companies. This is not a case that is going to quietly disappear into a conclusion of accidental drowning and close. The family will not allow it. The NOC will not allow it. And now the legal architecture, the subpoenas, the preservation letters, the independent pathologist waiting for tissue will not allow it either. Remember what we said at the very top of this video. The TikTok footage matters because it lives in the gap. The material gap. The formally documented absence of information between Nolan's last confirmed sighting and the moment that boat left that island. And now that gap is the subject of subpoenas. It is the subject of federal preservation orders. It is the subject of oceanic engineering analysis. And it is the subject of a grand jury that has not yet convened. Every piece of footage on every phone that was on Horn Island on July 4th, every clip that was uploaded, every story that was posted, every Snapchat that may or may not have been saved is now potentially evidence. and the people at those companies have been legally told to hold on to it. So the question we started with at the top of this video has not gone away. It has gotten sharper. Does the TikTok footage fill the gap? And does the grand jury get to see it in time? Because here is what we know about grand juries. Once the death investigation wraps, the case, including autopsy results, will be presented to a grand jury to decide whether to bring formal charges. Bring formal charges or not. That is the binary. That is where this entire case is going. And if the grand jury sees what the state has collected and the phone data has not been examined and the throat tissue has not been returned and the independent pathologist is not in the room, what they will be deciding is not whether Nolan Wells got justice. They will be deciding whether the investigation that was conducted produced enough evidence to charge anyone. An investigation that leaves no gap unmeasured. A grand jury that sees everything. And a finding, whatever it is, that they can look at and say they were not lied to. That is all, and right now, as of this week, they do not have that yet. The state autopsy is complete and sealed. The independent autopsy says undetermined. The phone inspection has not happened. The TikTok subpoenas are active. The grand jury has not convened. And the window, the 30-day window that Eric Hertz described, is either open or closing, depending on when you are watching this. We will be at this table every single time something moves, every grand jury update, every phone examination result, every piece of footage that gets formally introduced into this record. If this case has kept you watching, if something we said tonight made you sit up straighter, subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Because in a case this active, the next development is not weeks away. It may be days. And here is the question I want you to sit with tonight. Not, do you think someone hurt Nolan? Not, do you trust the investigation? This one, if the TikTok footage fills the gap, if it shows something the official record does not, and a grand jury still doesn't see it, what does that tell us about the gap between finding the truth and proving it? Drop your answer in the comments, because I want to know what stands out to you most. We will keep following this until there are real answers.